play it any louder, then it's getting shut down.
My name is Waffles, and I'm a government whistleblower turned political commentator, and this is the last 24 hours in the news. Today is October 23rd, 2025. It is 6:15 p.m. Mountain Standard Time. Here are the top U.S. news highlights for the past 24 hours. Judge rules the administration again violated limits on FEMA conditionality. A federal judge found recent FEMA grant letters impermissibly tied disaster aid to state immigration cooperation. The ruling protects immediate access to relief and creates new legal headwinds for administration conditionality policy. House oversight intensifies. Subpoenas and document demands continue. House committees pressed for documents and testimony from senior figures connected to prosecutions and enforcement actions, producing rapid legal posturing and potential witness subpoenas. Arizona sues U.S. House over delay in swearing in of member. Arizona filed suit seeking to force the House to seat a newly elected Democrat, a constitutional representation dispute that could change House dynamics. Federal efforts to deploy Guard troops to cities remain actively litigated. The administration sought emergency authorization to deploy National Guard planned federal troop support in jurisdictions including the Chicago area. Federal judges extended restraining orders in some places, Portland and others, and the administration has appealed, including emergency filings to higher courts. Local officials and civil liberties groups are opposing the deployments. Large immigration enforcement operations and related detentions surfaced in Chicago. Federal immigration raids and high-visibility operations generated local outcry and media coverage. These actions are prompting policy and civil rights scrutiny. Protest mobilization and No Kings rallies continued. Yesterday, there was a deployment of ICE in New York City. I saw active protests into the night. I'm not sure how late they went. Protest mobilization and No Kings rallies continued. Widespread protests in multiple cities against perceived authoritarian moves drew large peaceful turnouts and localized law enforcement deployments. Rights groups warned they will litigate against unlawful crowd control tactics. Offshore strikes near Venezuela continue to trigger domestic oversight and human rights scrutiny. Recent U.S. strikes on vessels in the Southern Caribbean drew UN complaints from Venezuela and calls from civil rights groups and some lawmakers for legal memos and congressional briefings on authority for lethal action. White House froze roughly $11 billion in infrastructure obligations. The freeze targets projects largely in opposition-run jurisdictions, Democratic states, and risks delaying flood control, transit, and water projects, immediate local economic and safety consequences for affected communities. Program rescissions, clean energy grants have produced a wave of state and county lawsuits. Harris County and a coalition of states locals filed suit to restore Solar for All clean energy funding for low-income households. Litigation could either restore funds or leave projects stalled. Pentagon Communications memo internal limits on staff contact with Congress. New internal guidance tightening direct staff contact with lawmakers was reported. The move raises governance and transparency concerns and could slow oversight briefings at a time of elevated scrutiny. Permitting and project delays continue because of shutdown and freezes, with agency staffing cutbacks and funding freezes. Environmental reviews, permits, and contract awards are being delayed, hurting local contractors, slowing housing and infrastructure projects, and increasing costs. People are looking at a potential delay or non-delivery of SNAP food assistance in the month of November. That is causing quite an uproar. Tariff rhetoric and trade threats. India, Colombia, and China are creating supply chain and commodity risk. Recent administration threats of steep tariffs on trading partners and retaliatory steps by some partners are elevating freight and commodity price uncertainty. Soybeans, cooking oil, and selected industrial inputs. CDC staffing disruption remains a material risk to surveillance and response capacity. Reporting earlier in the period showed broad RIF termination notices with partial rescissions, affecting hundreds of CDC staff. Public health leaders warn detection and surge response, as well as data flows, are degraded until staffing stabilizes. No new national outbreak reported in the last 24 hours, but capacity vulnerability persists. International relations diplomatic blowback from Caribbean strikes and tariff diplomacy continues. Venezuela took complaints to the UN over U.S. strikes. Several trading partners, India, Colombia, and China, are responding to U.S. tariff threats or export control moves, complicating diplomacy and trade. U.S. trade envoys heading to Malaysia to discuss rare earths, export controls with Chinese counterparts. High-level trade diplomacy is active as Washington tries to blunt China's export controls on critical minerals. Harris County and state coalition suits over Solar for All rescissions. Plaintiffs seek injunctions to restore funding. Court rulings blocking some domestic guard deployments. These filings are the fastest-moving legal actions tied to the administration's security policy. Congressional oversight subpoena posture continues against senior officials. Document requests remain outstanding. UN human rights experts called U.S. strikes near Venezuela extrajudicial executions. This is a significant international legal criticism that has immediate diplomatic and oversight implications. Arizona's lawsuit to force swearing in of a House member, a conditional shock to House procedure, and a potential near-term political flashpoints. Large immigration enforcement raids in Chicago that produced vivid images and local backlash, elevated domestic political risk, and potential legal challenges. Recent reporting has shown that there has been demolition taking place on the White House. Donald Trump is now tearing down the White House. The construction work began with demolition equipment visible outside of the east wing of the White House. Bulldozers and heavy machinery were seen tearing into the facade, windows, and structure of the east wing. The stated purpose is to build a new ballroom of roughly 90,000 square feet. It looks like a really crappy Minecraft base that somebody threw up in one day. Like, he's showing pictures of what he plans to put on the White House, and it looks horrendous. Capacity estimated at around 650 to 1,000 guests, and to modernize the East Wing, a portion of which historically housed the First Lady's offices. What, did he have a fight with his wife? Guest reception areas and other administrative facilities. The project is being marketed as largely privately funded by the president and donor corporations. Yeah, right. Not via direct appropriations. I would assume he's stealing our tax money to do this, and is estimated to cost around $250 to $300 million. Historic building concerns and oversight. The East Wing forms part of the historic White House complex, and changes to it normally involve a review by bodies such as the National Capital Planning Commission, NCPC. The fact that the demolition began before formal approval by the NCPC, or that the approval status is unclear, raises questions about proper process and oversight. Yeah, they're not being transparent about their finances either. There's a lot of secrecy in this administration, and now they're ripping down the White House. Symbolism and optics. The timing is controversial. This major project is underway while the federal government remains shut down, and there's a funding lapse. And while many federal workers are furloughed and public services are constrained, no public services for America. They're not going to fill the potholes in the frickin' road, okay? They're not going to work on protecting people from floods, but they're going to instead rip down the frickin' White House. And fire government employees. People are going to lose their jobs. And Americans are not going to have access to basic resources that the government should be providing. I don't care what the hell the MAGA bots in Russia want to say on people's accounts when they want to try to argue for what this administration is doing. There is a need for governance, okay? MAGA seems to be against the entire system of governance. It is 2025. All right. The policing system initially started when people were kind of like living in fucking huts. And you see, if somebody steals from a person, and then that person who got stolen from goes and burns a motherfucker's house down, and then it catches the whole town on fire, there's reasons why we have policing systems. There's reasons why we have a judicial system. There's reasons why we have protections against fraud. There's reasons why we have social safety net programs to include the welfare programs. There's reasons why these things exist. And other than that, I think the MAGA people are largely mostly in Russia. And I think that the people who are buying into the hateful shit that these people have to say online are freaking idiots, because they're buying into some shit that is being spread on the internet by bots in a foreign country. Other than that, there's a need for a system of governance. I'm sick of hearing it out of these whatever they are's in my comments, because these motherfuckers don't even know what they're talking about, and their viewpoints are just ridiculous as shit. So we're gonna move on from there, with the blind support for everything Trump does, the absolute ridiculousness of morons. AI generated provocative imagery amplified by the president. In recent news, the president reposted or shared an AI-generated video or image that many outlets described as provocative and demeaning towards protesters. Stylized footage of Trump wearing a crown in a fighter jet and grotesque elements, flinging shit everywhere. I think it's because he has dementia and he's having like weird fantasies about the shit that goes into his fucking diaper. Okay? That amplification of provocative material has been criticized as escalating political rancor and raising ethical questions about presidential use of AI content. No, I think the dude's delulu, and I think there's something weird going on, because like all these people are talking about how he smells bad and he shits himself, and now he's like spreading shit fantasies across the internet, and I think it's a clear indicator of dementia. If you ask me, that is my personal opinion on that one. No new verified allegations of fresh sexual misconduct or criminal lewd acts by the president or Trump administration officials were published in the last 24 hours. Court calendar on guard deployments, emergency appeals, and Supreme Court filings could produce immediate high-impact orders. Solar for All litigation motions for preliminary injunctions could decide whether low-income installations proceed. Congressional oversight escalation, subpoenas, or compelled testimony would increase political risk and headlines. Any further provocative social media posts from the president could trigger protest spikes and legal operational responses by cities. Trade diplomacy and tariff moves, rapid tariff announcements, or partner retaliation could affect commodities and household prices. No, I think that President Trump should be subjected to a psychological exam as a result of the shit that he's been posting online, especially if he's having fantasies about feces. Alright? Other than that, we are going to be covering ongoing issues in this news broadcast that I do here on my channel to make sure that we're paying attention to these issues, due to the fact that they're ongoing issues, and make sure that people don't forget about them. So unfortunately, my coverage is a little bit repetitive. Pentagon memo tightens communication with Congress. The United States Department of Defense issued a memo dated October 15th requiring staff to obtain permission before engaging with lawmakers, signaling increased internal control and possible constraints on oversight, secrecy, corruption. This change reduces transparency and raises concerns about congressional access to defense information during a period of heightened mobilization and military activity oversight. I'm pretty sure this motherfucker's working with Russia to overthrow the United States and destroy the country. 60,000 aviation safety workers unpaid amid shutdown. White House warns of flight disruption. The White House flagged that air traffic delays and cancellations may increase this holiday season as 13,000 controllers and 50,000 TSA officers work without pay. They're slaves, essentially. Donald Trump apparently has successfully enslaved our government employees. If they are working without pay, they better get back pay. And many may be forced into side jobs. Why it matters, a major consumer and infrastructure risk signal. Airline reliability, supply chains, and travel sector jobs may be directly impacted if the shutdown continues. Democrats warned the IRS, Internal Revenue Service, is being weaponized, targeting political opponents via criminal investigations. Senate Democrats sent letters to the IRS and Treasury accusing the administration of altering processes to expedite investigations of perceived political adversaries. Why it matters raises civil rights and governance concerns. If true, it signals partisan use of law enforcement machinery and could provoke legal and institutional ramifications. For those of you who don't already know, I'm a government whistleblower. There is fraud on my unemployment account. If I were to file my taxes, the government would steal money from me that I do not owe them. So I just quit filing taxes. And I'm sure I'm not the only one, because I was working at the Department of Labor and a bunch of people had money getting stolen off of their accounts. So, this move with the IRS, I mean, I'm just assuming that everything is just in disarray. Other than that, you know, if they're going to defraud millions of Americans, which I'm pretty sure is what Donald Trump has been doing since 2020. If they're going to defraud millions of Americans, of course, they're not going to want the IRS functioning properly. And they're going to try to do some shady shit, because it's going to help them with concealing the fraud that they need to be investigated for. Shutdown firings at the Community Development Financial Institutions Fund could delay low-income community investment. More than 1,400 Treasury staff were reportedly fired or set to be during the shutdown. Key staff at CDFI fund that oversee opportunity zones and new markets tax credits are among the people who have been laid off by the Trump administration. Our entire government's being dismantled. It is a very unsafe situation that we are finding ourselves in collectively as a nation. And these are all the things a foreign adversary would do, but for some reason, out of 340 million Americans, nobody's doing a fucking thing to stop this motherfucker. I mean, we do have lawsuits, and he's losing a lot of lawsuits. I'm just pissed off. So that's the pissed off part of me that is speaking. Why it matters, this affects well-targeted federal economic development programs and could reduce investment in distressed communities, a real-world risk for states and counties relying on those flows. Corporate warning, Hilton Worldwide says shutdown is hurting travel demand and downgrades 2025 revenue outlook. Hilton's CFO flagged the impact of the continuing federal funding lapse and uncertainty on business and travel bookings. This signals the private sector cost of the shutdown is becoming measurable, not just on federal pay, but consumer spending, travel sectors, and broader economic confidence. Today, the markets closed with the S&P 500 at $671.76, up 0.57%. Dow Jones Industrial Average closed at $467.29, up 0.32%. Invesco QQQ Trust Series $610.58, up 0.84%. So the market has essentially nearly approximately regained its losses from yesterday. Here are the U.S. trade and economic highlights from the past 24 hours. The Ministry of Commerce of the People's Republic of China confirmed that He Lifeng, I think it's He Lifeng, will meet with U.S. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent and Trade Representative Jameson Greer from Friday in Malaysia at the U.S. and China, as the U.S. and China aim to de-escalate trade tensions. The U.S. is preparing to initiate an investigation into China's compliance with the 2020 trade agreement, which could trigger new tariffs under Section 301 as early as Friday. And remember, international organizations are warning that Trump's aggressions toward China could destabilize the entire global economy by roughly like 7% or something. I'm pretty sure I reported on that a couple days ago. The U.S. announced sanctions against Russian oil giants Rosneft and Lukoil, causing oil prices to surge 5% and raising inflation and supply chain concerns. The ongoing federal government shutdown continues to hamper release of key economic data, creating a data vacuum that complicates policy making and investor decision making. The U.S. government raised the allowable quota of low-tariff Argentine beef imports to 80,000 metric tons in an attempt to reduce consumer beef prices, sparking dissent among U.S. ranchers. And remember, kids, the stock market is not the economy. Just because the S&P 500 or Dow Jones might be performing does not mean that wages are growing, jobs are secure, inflation is under control, or that people are thriving. And here is the latest hazardous weather outlook for the next few days. Northeast and Great Lakes in east central Ohio and northern West Virginia. A freeze warning is in effect for early Friday morning, and a frost advisory applies to additional northern Ohio and adjacent Pennsylvania zones. After that, no widespread hazardous weather is currently forecast in this region through the next 3 days. Southeast and north and central Georgia, a high fire danger condition is likely this afternoon and early evening. Dry fuels plus elevated winds create near critical fire weather conditions. Fire weather concerns continue into Friday and Saturday in the same area. No major thunderstorms or floods currently expected. Central and southern plains and Midwest, in northwest Colorado and much of Utah, precipitation, rain, and mountain snow is expected today and tonight above 10,000 feet in parts of Colorado, 1 to 4 inches of snow possible. Valley rain in lower elevations, strong thunderstorms with gusty winds and hail are also possible in southeast Utah and southwest Colorado this afternoon. Dry conditions expected by Saturday though another storm system may move in late weekend. West Coast and Intermountain West, the mountain zones of Colorado and Utah described above incur snowfall and wind-related hazards. Elsewhere in the Intermountain West, currently low hazard beyond fire and fuel risk, and the precipitation event noted above. For the Pacific Northwest and coastal zones, while no major hazard is flagged in the next 24 to 48 hours, models show precipitation and increased wind potential later in the period, days 2 to 3, that should be monitored. Residents in the frost-freeze zones, Ohio, West Virginia, and PA should cover sensitive plants, protect outdoor assets, and expect colder overnight temperatures. Georgia residents, avoid outdoor burning. If traveling to Colorado or Utah mountainous zones, be prepared for slick roads. Stay alert for updates of frontal systems in maritime and coastal hazard zones in the Pacific, Northwest, and coastal areas. And here are the top international news highlights from the past 24 hours. Vladimir Putin calls new U.S. sanctions an unfriendly act, but claims they won't affect Russia's economy. The U.S. imposed sanctions on Russia's large oil companies, Rosneft and Lukoil, provoking Putin's warning of an overwhelming response and concerns over global oil supply squeeze. Donald Trump to meet Chinese President Xi Jinping next week in South Korea as part of an Asia trip. The White House confirmed the meeting after a period of escalating U.S.-China trade tensions and rare earth export controls. Oil prices surge more than 5% as U.S.-EU sanction Russia's energy sector. Major oil benchmarks jumped after sanctions targeting large Russian oil firms, with ripple effects expected in global inflation, trade, and consumer goods. Trump says no formal declaration of war required to act against drug cartels. The U.S. president stated that operations against cartels, including land-based campaigns, will proceed without a war declaration, highlighting an expansion of military-style enforcement. It would be great if he was actually targeting the cartels, but unfortunately, it looks like Donald Trump, his administration, has been shooting people who are fishing in the Caribbean. Fishermen. Especially considering that he is returning the people who actually survived getting shot rather than taking them through court proceedings. Something to consider. That's what it looks like Doesn't look good. Well, I wish the president was actually going after cartels. I don't think he's actually going after cartels, especially because he has loosened restrictions on the cartels in the United States. That was in my report like last week or something. Or 2 weeks ago. I reported on that. So they are reducing oversight of the cartels in the United States. And Donald Trump has been hanging out with the family members of that one dude from the cartel that I can't remember his name right now, that was putting dead bodies in vats of acid. Right now, I'm looking at a CBS News article from May 15, 2025. 17 family members of notorious cartel leader enter U.S. in deal with Trump administration, Mexico says. So don't believe him when he's saying that he's cracking down on cartels, because if he's hanging out with the cartel and bringing in... It was family members of El Chapo. And he has also loosened security against the cartels. And he's making these claims that the people that he's shooting in the Caribbean Sea, near the Gulf of Mexico, over by Venezuela, are cartel members, while loosening security against the cartels here in the United States. I don't think so. I'm just having a hard time believing what appears to me to be a load of bullshit. Federal agent deployment to San Francisco called off by Trump, while the Trump administration had planned to send federal agents for enforcement in San Francisco. The plan was canceled following discussions with the mayor and tech industry leaders, raising questions about the federal enforcement strategy. U.S. ultimatum on Russian oil exports hits India's purchases hard. Washington sanctions on Russian oil firms are forcing Indian refiners to sharply reduce imports. Russia faces mounting pressure on two fronts: sanctions and shrinking export markets. This concludes our reporting for today. I'm gonna go now. We'll see you later. Everybody stay safe out there.
So the Olympics is great. And Johnny, for the others, you know, the World Cup, Johnny is the head of it. We had our top people, Wasserman. They all came in on the Olympics, and then I saw Johnny. And we got the World Cup, too. And, you know, it's only because they rigged the election that I'll be your president representing you there. You know, I got both of them. I got the Olympics, and I got the World Cup. And I said, you know, it's too bad. One was in 2026 and the other was in 2028. And I said, I won't be there. I won't be your president. But then they rigged the election and now we won. So I'm going to be your president for the Olympics and for the World Cup. So Johnny, thank you for the World Cup. And everybody, thank you for the Olympics. We're going to have a great time.
Hey guys, don't forget to like, share, subscribe, and comment to my videos. And also, don't forget to check out my shop where you could get this awesome Real Patriots Punch Nazis t-shirt. America, fuck yeah! And if you go to the link tree in my bio on most platforms, it's got links to everything, all of my stuff. You can find my shop there. I'm on eBay. You can also get this cool Exterminate MAGA sticker, because MAGA's fucking cockroaches. And fuck MAGA. Abolish MAGA. Fuck you, MAGA.